I'm just going to run through some of the materials that you might need, and it's a bit of a choice how you get started with watercolor. I'm a great believer in buying the best that you can afford, but a lot of the student quality paints that are made by the professional companies like Winsor and Newton, Daler Rowney, are very good quality. And the only difference between student grade and professional grade is the professional grade have more pigment in them. So they do go a lot further, but they cost more. But to get started, you don't need too many colours. So Winsor and Newton do some nice little sets like this. And I would say 20 colours to start with, something like this would probably be all you need. So you need sort of 3 blues, 2 or 3 reds, 2 or 3 yellows, and some browny shades, and probably a nice bright pink. So there's a few different sets to choose from. Winsor and Newton do really nice Cotman. So Cotman are the starter, they're the student set. So you can buy these in little pits, and they all come in different sizes. So 24 would give you a really comprehensive set. You don't need to go to the 48 because you'll have lots of colours in there that you can probably mix yourself. But just to show you, the other option you have is to buy the little tubes and fill something yourself. So you can buy metal tins like this, and you can fill, they some of them come with empty little containers and you can fill them. So this is probably my top end set, and that's got more colours in it than I really need to get started, but it just gives you an idea. Now, what I'm doing for some of my workshops is I have bought the tubes and then I just put them in here. Now these you can get quite cheaply. They're small plastic pallets. They're really portable because you can always use something else to mix on. This is a bigger version of the same thing. And you can put the colours in here, and then you've got lots of, well, you can mix in those wells as well. But I think possibly to get started, you might as well just get a Cotman, Winsor & Newton Cotman set with about whatever you can afford, but 24 colours would be brilliant. Anything between 12 and 24 will give you pretty much the majority of what you need. So that they come as these sort of sets in different shapes and sizes. That will give you something like that. Now, just to explain, this is Derwent. They're slightly different. They're not pure watercolor, but this little set here, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 colors. When I mixed them all, it gives me a huge range of colors. So starting small and really getting to understand your colours will make a big difference. So I always recommend, and this is what we will be doing on the first week, is we will be swatching out the colours that you have. So this is actually all of my tubes. But there are certain colours, as you begin to get used to colours generally, and they're the same whatever you're painting in, whichever medium, when you understand the colours and their different properties, it really helps. So things like ultramarine blue with watercolour, it granulates quite a lot. It spreads rapidly in water. And I know that I can mix it with a more orangey blue, a more orangey yellow to make a nice olive green. Cobalt blue is often used for skies, and cerulean is another good one to have, which I've got somewhere. It's more of a blue-green. And you really need a couple of yellows, so a lemon yellow, a warm orangey yellow, a bright red, like pillar box red, and then a cooler, more mauvey red. some browns, but you should find in the starter sets they will have all of those colours. So, as I say, buy the best that you can afford. Come back to me if you have any queries. The other things you will need are decent brushes. And again, I would recommend the student grade of either Daily Rowney, which Aquafine, or Winsor & Newton do Cotman. And you will need a big wash brush, something like this. It needs to be soft because it needs to hold a lot of water. This you can, the proper ones of these are squirrel mops. They're actual squirrel hair, but this is actually a Daily Rowney Aquafine pointed wash. This is brilliant because it holds tons of water and it goes to a nice point. And that's probably a third of the price of a proper squirrel mop, but they're really good. Then you will need a size 8 round. This is called a round brush. And then something like a size 6, and then one of these is a very long thin it's called a rigger, so it's a very long thin one, so it's great for doing twigs and pointy things. And I think both of them do sets of watercolor brushes, so they should be quite easy to find. When you see, if you buy a Cotman water set, when you run out you can start to refill it using professional quality paints once you've got it sort of under your belt. So I think that's a good way to start. Although I have just purchased this box of Meaden watercolors. Now they're Chinese, but they were only £15, and I've got every color in here that I need. They behave very much like professional watercolor paints. I have heard a few people say, and these are what they look like. I have heard a few people say that swatch them out, there might be ink in them, but we're not being purists at this stage. We just want to get used to the colours and the flow of water. So this is actually a really good buy, Meaden watercolours, and you can find them online. And then you would just need a palette like this, or a bigger one's even better, to mix it into. So that will help. You can actually use a plate. You can use a ceramic plate, but they're not very portable. Paper. So good quality watercolor paper, even to practice on, is a real bonus, because if you practice with cheap watercolors and cheap paper, you will never learn how to use decent watercolors and paper. And it's learning how your paints behave on the paper that you're using that will make a difference, and how each of the pigments behave, because every pigment behaves differently. And eventually the idea is that you will come to know the names of the different colours and how they behave. So working with a smaller set to start with is actually an advantage. So some decent watercolour papers to look for, and you can get these from places like Hobbycraft or the Range. What you want is 300 GM or £140, either rough or cold pressed or cold pressed not. So that means it's going to have a bit of texture to it. You can get hot pressed, but that is really smooth, and it's usually used for botanicals. So if we're going to be doing a mix of things, it's good to have one with a tooth, shall we say. This is another way you can get it. This is a block, so it's gummed on all sides, and you can paint while it's actually in the block. Because with watercolor paper, you want to be able to put lots of water on it. One way of doing that is to use gummed tape, and you tape your paper around onto a board when the paper's wet. You soak it for 15 minutes, tape it to a board, let it dry, and then it's stretched. And then when you paint on it, it doesn't buckle. This prevents buckling anyway, but it's a more expensive way to buy paper, but it's an option. Another way, buy the biggest pad that you can afford, and then you can cut it down to size. So this is Langton, this is 23 by 16 inches. So it's A2, £140, 300 GSM, and it is rough again. So either rough or cold pressed knot. One of these little spray bottles is really useful for wetting your paints and wetting your paint on the paper as you're going. A little bottle of art masking fluid, because you can use that for different techniques. You will probably need some just light weight, what do they call it? Not too adhesive tape. You can often find artist tape, and then you can use that to tape paper down. You'll want kitchen roll. You'll want a little cloth to wipe your brushes on. You will want a couple of pots for water. I use great big ones like this, but you can use jam jars or anything. Don't use yogurt pots, they'll fall over. But you want one for your dirty water and one to put your brush in with clean water. Then you will need probably things like a ruler, a pencil, a rubber, or eraser as we have to call them now, and that's probably all you'll need to start with.